last lesson, you learned that our bodies respond to stimuli in two ways: nervous regulation and chemical regulation. This lesson will focus on nervous regulation, accomplished by the nervous system. The basic unit of structure and function in the nervous system is the nerve cell or neuron. Like any cell, the neuron has a nucleus, cytoplasm, and all the other organelles you've studied within the cell body. The neuron, however, is specialized to transmit electrical nerve impulses all over your body. So on top of the usual structures, a neuron has some special ones as well. Dendrites branch out like roots to collect nerve impulses and carry them to the cell body. The axon is like a long tail that carries nerve impulses away from the cell body to the dendrites of other neurons. The axon is wrapped with Schwann cells that form the myelin sheath. The myelin sheath helps to speed up the transmission of nerve impulses by forcing them to jump over the Schwann cells from one node to the next. Electrical nerve impulses are received by the dendrites, travel to the cell body, and then down the axon to the axon terminal. When the nerve impulse reaches the axon terminal, it must continue to the dendrites of the next neuron. In order to do this, it must cross the tiny space between the two neurons called the synapse. The electrical impulse cannot jump the synapse, however. Instead, once the impulse reaches the end of the axon, chemicals called neurotransmitters are released. The neurotransmitters cross the synapse and bond with receptors on the dendrites of the next neuron. This causes a new impulse to fire in the next neuron in the chain. In this way, nerve impulses are able to travel from sensory organs or receptors, like your hands or eyes, to your brain, and back to an effector like a muscle or gland. When your body transmits nerve impulses, there are three different types of neurons that come into play: sensory neurons, interneurons, and motor neurons. Sensory neurons receive information from the environment and carry impulses to the brain or spinal cord for processing. Interneurons are found in the brain and spinal cord and are responsible for interpreting stimuli. Motor neurons carry impulses from the brain or spinal cord back out to the rest of the body so you can react to stimuli. A reflex arc shows these types of neurons in action. A reflex is a quick, automatic response that happens without thinking about it. For example, if a doctor hits your knee with a rubber mallet, a sensory neuron in your knee picks up the stimulus and sends nerve impulses to the spinal cord. In the spinal cord, interneurons decide the correct reaction to the stimulus and then send impulses through motor neurons back to your leg muscles, and you kick. All of this occurs in a fraction of a second, and notice how the brain is not involved in a reflex arc. The fact that your spinal cord takes charge in this case allows a reflex to occur much faster than if your brain got involved. At this point, we've talked a lot about nerve cells, but what about the organs of the nervous system? The brain and spinal cord are organs that make up the central nervous system. The vast network of nerves outside the central nervous system that extend throughout your body make up the peripheral nervous system. The brain controls most of the activities that occur in the body. It is protected by the skull and three tough membrane layers called the meninges. Liquid, called the cerebral spinal fluid, cushions the brain. The cerebrum is the largest section of your brain. The outside portion of the cerebrum, called the cortex, controls thinking, voluntary activities, and senses. The cerebellum, at the rear of the brain, controls balance and coordination. The medulla, or brainstem, controls vital functions like heartbeat and breathing. The medulla connects the brain to the spinal cord, which is encased within the vertebral column. The spinal cord is responsible for transmitting all nerve impulses to and from the brain. All of the nerves outside of the brain and spinal cord are known as the peripheral nervous system. Peripheral nerves run all over your body to places you have conscious control over, like your muscles, and places you can't consciously regulate, like your heart and endocrine glands. The peripheral nerves that you have conscious control over are collectively called the somatic nervous system. The nerves you can't consciously control are called the autonomic nervous system. Like any system, the nervous system is vulnerable to disease and disorders. Following are just a few examples. Meningitis is an inflammation of the meninges caused by a virus or bacteria. Symptoms include severe headache, stiff neck, high fever, and even death. Cerebral palsy is a birth disorder characterized by impaired motor function. People with cerebral palsy oftentimes are confined to a wheelchair and may not even be able to speak. Polio is a viral disease most often affecting children that causes paralysis of the legs. The risk of polio infection is reduced with immunizations.